I walked towards the altar, believing the past had released me, but at the doorway stood three men whose names I once bore. They hadn't come to watch me marry. They came to unmask the man I trusted with the rest of my life. The wedding march froze into a deathly silence as the groom faced the guests he never invited. And in that silence, the darkest vow was spoken, not by the groom, but by his sworn enemies. Dear friends, your comments mean the world to us. Like this video and right where you are watching us from, we will be happy to send you our regards. If I had known that trust would stride into my fifth wedding wearing 3 identical black suits, I might have clutched my bouquet a little tighter, or dropped it altogether. But that morning, the sky over Charleston was so impossibly blue that even the riverboats seemed to pause and admire themselves in the water. I was 54, twice divorced, twice widowed, and determined to believe a woman could still choose joy without begging permission from her past. My name is Magnolia Price, though most people simply call me Maggie, and on this June Saturday, I intended to retire the nickname Runaway Bride for good. The stately veranda of the Armitage house had been transformed into a magnolia-scented chapel. Spanish moss swayed like lace curtains above rows of white chairs. Aunt Corinne fussed with my veil, insisting the pearls catch the light so heaven itself takes notice. I teased that heaven was welcome so long as it RSVP'd and sat quietly in the back. Laughter steadied my pulse, but the truth rattled in my chest. This was my last leap of faith, and I had not checked how high the drop might be. My fiancé, Ethan Sinclair, waited at the altar. Tall, silver at his temples, the kind of man who writes thank you notes by hand and never forgets to tip the valet. After 4 husbands addicted to chaos, Carter's gambling, Julian's affairs, Thomas's violence, and Miles's bottle, Ethan's steadiness felt like a lullaby. He ran a boutique investment firm, spoke in measured sentences, and kissed my knuckles whenever the world grew loud. I told myself I'd finally chosen the harbor over the hurricane. Stay with me, because the moment the doors swing open, everything I believe about Ethan will crack like glass beneath a careless heel. The string quartet shifted into Pachelbel, my cue. I stepped forward, satin whispering at my ankles, veil floating like captured breath. Guests leaned in, their faces a collage of faith and speculation. Somewhere among them, my daughter Camille dabbed her eyes, hopeful that the 5th time truly was the charm. Halfway down the aisle, the scent of peonies swelled, dizzying and sweet, masking the salt swing of the harbor breeze. Each step felt like threading a needle, stitch joy to regret, hope to fear. My palms sweated against the bouquet's ribbon. Ethan's smile widened. I thought, here, finally, is a man who brings calm. That was when the oak doors at the back of the veranda groaned open. A hush descended so suddenly the gulls seemed to silence themselves mid-cry. I stopped walking. The minister's book sagged in his hands. 3 silhouettes filled the doorway, the morning sun forging halos around their shoulders. For a heartbeat, I could not breathe, and then recognition struck like a match to dry tinder. Carter Hale stepped in first, still broad-shouldered, but lined with debts I no longer owed. Julian Cross followed, impeccable as ever, his smile reduced to a slash of tension. And bringing up the rear, Miles Porter, sober now, or at least pretending, his gaze steady for once instead of glassy. My bouquet sagged. Blood rushed in my ears. No one should confront her entire romantic resume before the blessing is even spoken. Yet there they were, the 4 chapters I'd closed, republished, against my will in a single edition. Shock rippled through the guests. Aunt Corinne let out a gasp so high-pitched it could have shattered crystal. Camille half rose, hand at her throat. The 3 men did not look at me. Their eyes, different shades of betrayal I once believed only I could recognize, were fixed on Ethan. Carter's voice, rough as gravel scraped over asphalt, broke the spell. You told us we'd never see you again, Sinclair. Ethan's shoulders twitched almost imperceptibly, yet in that small flicker, I saw a door slam shut behind his composed facade. Julian added, We remember promises, Ethan. Especially the ones that cost us everything. Murmurs swelled among the guests, a tide against the pillared veranda. Miles spoke last, softer than the others, but carrying the weight of an anchor. You owe us, and debts don't vanish because you put on a boutonniere. Ethan did not reply. He didn't even blink. He simply stared at the three men as if they were ghosts conjured by the low country heat. My heart hammered. The entire scene tilted like the moment before a hurricane lands when the air grows heavy with the promise of ruin. I felt every eye swing back to me, gauging whether the bride would crumble. Instead, I lifted my chin. "Ethan," I whispered, though everyone heard. "What's happening?" He opened his mouth. No sound emerged. And there, beneath garlands of lilies and the approving gaze of heaven Aunt Corinne had coaxed, I understood. The calm I loved might be nothing more than the hush before the storm. A minute can stretch into an eternity when you wait for a man to defend the life you thought you shared. The veranda remained frozen, summer flies hovering motionless as if time itself feared to intrude. Ethan's silence was a lighthouse with the bulb shattered, still tall, still claiming purpose, but utterly useless when the fog rolled in. My pulse drummed against the bones of my wrist. I forced myself to breathe through the corset of panic tightening beneath my ribs. Listen closely, because the next word spoken will tilt the floorboards and send the wedding cake sliding toward disaster. Julian stepped forward, patent leather shoes clicking like a judge's gavel. "Magnolia doesn't know, does she?" he asked Ethan, voice sharp enough to slice teal. "Tell her how you raised money for the Sapphire Fund. Tell her how you vanished when we signed the papers and left us holding the debt." Gasps rippled among the guests. The Sapphire Fund, vaguely familiar from society gossip, had collapsed 3 years ago, dragging dozens of investors into ruin. I remembered skimming that headline over morning coffee, grateful for once tragedy belonged to strangers. I never dreamed those strangers shared my guest list. Ethan's jaw flexed. "This isn't the time," he said, soft yet edged like a razor kept in velvet. Carter barked a laugh. "Amazing. Same line you used at the courthouse when the lawsuits rained down." My fingers spasmed, crushing peony petals. Ethan had framed his career change as reinvention, never as escape. The air smelled suddenly of rotting magnolias. Aunt Corinne whispered a prayer. Camille's husband pulled out his phone as if the truth might fit into a text message. On the periphery, the string quartet faltered, bowstrings squeaking before fading entirely. Hooked yet? What they reveal next will test whether forgiveness is bravery or a reckless gamble with your own heart. Miles produced a small envelope addressed in Ethan's handwriting. He held it up like evidence in a courtroom. "Your apology letter," he said, eyes glinting. 76 words of regret and a promise to set things right. "We never heard from you again." Ethan's throat bobbed. "I paid what I could," he muttered. "Pennies," Carter spat. "You knew the woman we loved was sick. You promised her experimental treatment if we all invested. She held on to that hope like scripture until the hospital bills buried her." I steadied myself. "What woman?" I asked, though dread already curled its fingers around the answer. "Isabella Torres," Miles said softly. "Ethan's fiancée before all of us knew what he was capable of. She was my sister," Ethan finally spoke, voice brittle. "Bella wanted to believe miracles. I tried." Julian cut him off. "No, you tried using her story to lure investors. You let hope become bait, and when the trap snapped, you walked away." Ethan turned toward me, eyes storm gray. "Maggie, I can explain." He used my nickname, the softer version of my identity, as if familiarity alone could soften the blow. "Then explain," I said, each syllable tasting like ash. Carter lifted a hand. "First, decide whether you want to hear his version or the truth we lived." Camille stepped into the aisle, tears streaking mascara. "Mom, please," she whispered. "Come away." But ignorance is a luxury you surrender the moment doubt enters a marriage vow. Ethan took a breath. "The fund failed, yes, but not because I intended fraud. The treatment seemed promising. We all took the risk. I lost everything, too." Julian snapped, "Accept your freedom." Except your spotless reputation you reinvented here. Guests shifted. Some rose uncomfortable as though standing could shield them from contagion. Stay tuned, because the choice I make in the next heartbeat will determine whether this wedding ends with a kiss or with sirens. I squared my shoulders. Gentlemen, I said, voice steadier than my knees, why today? Miles answered, because he keeps running. Your engagement announcement gave us a date and place. We figured a wedding was the one event he couldn't abandon. I looked at Ethan. He parted his lips, then closed them. And that silence, more than accusations, weighed on me like wet cement. A siren wailed in the distance. Ambulance, not yet ours, but omen enough. This ceremony can't continue, I declared. Ethan reached for me. I stepped back. Until I know exactly who you are, Ethan Sinclair, I can't become your wife. The minister closed his book. The quartet packed their instruments. Chairs scraped as guests collected purses and questions. Yet beneath the disarray, a current of unfinished business pulsed. The aisle that had promised me forever now became a gauntlet of maybes, and deep inside, past heartbreak and humiliation, a spark of defiance flickered. I would find the full truth if it took all that remained of my faith and love. The veranda emptied like a drained bathtub, guests spiraling toward shuttles and ride shares carrying scandal in their purses like unauthorized souvenirs. Only 20 minutes earlier, they had expected champagne toasts. Now they whispered litigation, betrayal, and terminal illness. I stood near the altar, the wreckage, watching Ethan, Carter, Julian, and Miles form a tense semicircle beneath the azalea arch. The minister fled inside, claiming urgent prayer, though I suspected terror of deeper truth. Caution. What unfolds here will peel skin from memory and expose the raw nerve of every promise I've ever believed. Ethan tried first. Maggie, don't do this in front of them. In front of whom? I asked. Your ghosts? My voice cracked on the hard edge of anger. I gestured to my ex-husbands. They're mine too. At least they arrived with honesty, not deception. Carter flinched but held my gaze. Julian folded his arms. Miles traced a pew's grain as though grounding himself against relapse. I asked, Is Isabella dead? Yes, Ethan said. Carter supplied details. Cervical cancer, diagnosis too late. Ethan had met her in a clinical trial support group, fallen in love, and convinced her that experimental immunotherapy offered hope, if only funds could be raised. He enlisted college roommates, created the Sapphire Fund. When the FDA halted the trial, everything collapsed. Investors demanded returns Ethan promised but never documented. Isabella died before she learned she'd been leveraged. Every sentence drove splinters under my fingernails. I saw the pattern. When storms brewed, Ethan didn't batten down. He abandoned ship. My instinct had been to seek calm. His instinct was to manufacture it by running from consequences. A gust of marsh breeze lifted my veil. It slipped free and spiraled across the empty seats like a lost gull. I didn't chase it. Hook alert. The decision I make next will rewrite every ending I once imagined for love. I faced the three men. What outcome do you want? Julian said, restitution. Carter added, acknowledgement. Miles whispered, peace. I asked, if I help expose him, do you walk away? They nodded, three broken accords aligning into reluctant alliance. I studied Ethan, suit impeccable. Boutonniere wilting, a man at the center of a collapsing galaxy who still hoped gravity obeyed his will. Maggie, he pleaded, you don't understand the whole story. Then enlighten me. I gestured toward the silent church office. Bring documentation. Bring bank statements. Bring whatever truth you think can still stand. He hesitated too long. That pause became verdict. Carter extended an arm in solidarity. Together, we headed inside, leaving Ethan beneath the arch meant for vows, alone with lilies that now smelled like funerary wreaths. Stay, reader, because excavating the past is never clean. Sometimes the shovel strikes bone. Inside, the bridal suite became war room. Camellia wallpaper mocked the tension. Miles booted a laptop. Carter produced notarized letters. Julian uploaded subpoenas. Bank transfers, shell corporations, offshore accounts. They spilled across the screen like dark water flooding a pristine kitchen. Each document wrestled with Ethan's narrative until the shape of truth emerged. He had diverted investor capital into a private trust weeks before the trial was canceled. When regulators froze Sapphire's accounts, his personal funds remained untouched offshore. He paid token settlements to appear contrite, buying time to reinvent himself 2 states away under a new firm, Sinclair Strategic. A wire transfer appeared, dated 6 months ago. $50,000 from Sinclair. Strategic to a hospice foundation in Isabella's name. Guilt money, hush money. Another hook. When guilt writes checks, does redemption cash them? Julian exhaled. With your testimony, we can force arbitration. Miles added, and maybe stop him from hurting the next believer. I nodded, though my skull felt hollow. Footsteps echoed. Ethan approaching. He entered pale, shoulders sagging. I won't fight, he said quietly. I'll sign whatever is required. Carter asked, too late for contrition? Maybe, Ethan answered. His eyes found mine. I loved you, Maggie, but I'm broken in ways I don't mend. A sad truth. Sometimes sincerity arrives only after the damage is irreversible. I inhaled dust and rosewater. I loved the man you pretended to be. Who I don't know. Rain hammered the shutters of the bridal suite as if the sky itself had questions, and every drop demanded an answer Ethan could no longer postpone. By early afternoon, the veranda lay deserted, white chairs overturned like chess pieces after a reckless gambit. I sat between Carter and Julian at the borrowed conference table while Miles paced, a restless metronome ticking off our dwindling patience. Ethan stood alone at the window, collar wilted, watching puddles swallow the flower petals we'd meant to scatter as symbols of joy. Stop looking for an exit, I told him. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, steady, commanding, the voice of a woman who had run out of room to compromise. Ethan met my gaze, and for a fleeting second I mourned the warmth I once saw there. But tenderness is a currency counterfeiters can forge, and I now examined every note he ever paid me. Julian slid a stack of contracts between us. Sign, and we file a joint restitution claim with the courts Monday. Refuse, and the SEC receives our dossier by dawn. Careful, one signature can be salvation or a confession carved in stone. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. He glanced at me, perhaps hoping I'd intercede, but a chasm yawned between us, paved with half-truths and broken vows. Miles suddenly stopped pacing. Before ink touches paper, we want to know about the other accounts. Ethan stiffened. There are none. Carter scoffed, digging a flash drive from his breast pocket. We traced a shell corporation in Belize, Seaside Haven Holdings. Care to explain the $750,000 parked there? My pulse thudded. A year ago, Ethan told me our retirement fund held modest but solid returns. I'd never questioned the details. Lesson. Ask questions while answers are cheap. Delay, and the interest compounds in heartbreak. Ethan exhaled, shoulders sagging. Those funds were earmarked for investors. Investors? I asked. Or your new life once the ink on our marriage certificate dried? His silence was an indictment no jury could overturn. Outside, thunder rolled across the harbor, rattling panes in their frames. Somewhere deep inside, a splinter of grief pierced the armor of anger, but I pressed forward. Grief can heal later. Truth cannot wait. Julian pushed another document forward. An irrevocable trust. We want that Belize money frozen and redirected, half toward Isabella's memorial foundation, half to the investors you abandoned. Ethan's jaw twitched. You'll ruin me. Carter leaned back. We're not here for revenge. We're here because you taught us trust is elastic. You stretched it until it snapped around our necks. Ethan's eyes flicked to me. Maggie, please. Believe I wanted to be a better man with you. I inhaled, feeling the corset of my wedding gown tighten with every heartbeat. Intentions aren't a scaffold strong enough to build a life on, I said. Miles checked his watch. Decision time. Light from a lightning flash seared the room. Ethan took the pen, and in that electric moment the world balanced on a nib of ink. Stay with me, because a signature written in desperation can still bleed through the paper and stain everyone who touches it. He signed. The pen clattered to the table. No applause followed, only the hiss of rain and the muted sob I couldn't quite swallow. Julian gathered the pages. We'll need a notary. Miles nodded toward the chapel office. Ministers licensed, Carter added, and witnesses. 3 ought to suffice. Ethan reached for my hand. I stepped back, veilless, bouquetless, but not voiceless. You have work to do, gentlemen. I'll see you at dusk. As they left with Ethan corralled between them, my legs finally shook. Grief surged, then rage, then something more reckless, curiosity. If the past had just swallowed my future, I intended to claw answers from its throat. The rain eased to a pinprick drizzle, leaving the air metallic with ozone as if the storm had scoured away polite pretense. Camille found me in the hallway outside the empty reception hall. Satin ribbon trailed from her updo, forgotten in the upheaval. She cupped my elbows, voice trembling. Mom, let me take you home. I shook my head. Home will still be there tomorrow. Today I need the truth. Together we crossed the ballroom, its once gleaming parquet now dull beneath abandoned centerpieces. I imagined the ghost of my intended first dance floating across the floor, a waltz rewritten into a dirge. Camille squeezed my hand. I never trusted him, she whispered. I managed a rueful smile. Perhaps maternal stubbornness blinded me. We reached Ethan's dressing suite. Inside, the detritus of a groom lingered. Cufflinks glinting like lies, a half-drunk glass of bourbon, a leather journal. The journal drew me, bound in navy calfskin engraved with his initials, E.S. It looked innocent, but instinct insisted it was a vault. I opened it. Rows of meticulous handwriting chronicled appointments, client notes, and, my breath stalled, lists of risk mitigation strategies. Line after line detailed contingency plans. Relocate to Denver, liquidate antiques, establish new LLCS under Cousins. Name, and one header, Plan Magnolia. I read, if Maggie expresses doubt, expedite honeymoon relocation, encourage sale of her downtown condo, invest proceeds into Sinclair Strategic, reassure with joint account visibility, limited. The verbs marched like infantry across the page. I felt Camille's grip tighten. Here was love reduced to a project. Tenderness transformed into risk management. Halfway through the journal, a photograph slipped free, Ethan laughing beside a younger woman with Isabella's haunted eyes. The date on the back. 2 months after the Sapphire Fund collapse. He looked unburdened, as though grief lasted only as long as litigation allowed. Something inside me calcified. I slid the journal into my purse. Evidence is easier to pocket than regret. Camille whispered, "What will you do with it?" "First," I said, "I'll read every page. Then I'll decide whether Ethan's redemption costs more than I'm willing to pay." A knock startled us. Carter stood in the doorway, rainwater dripping from his coat collar. "He signed the notary book," he said, voice subdued. "Julian's filing the paperwork now." Miles followed, carrying a folder. He extended it. "Copy for you. Legal obligations itemized, restitution schedule outlined, personal apology clause drafted. My name appeared twice. Once as intended spouse, once as witness. Former spouse. I corrected silently. The ceremony had ended without a single vow. I turned to Carter. "Why help me?" "I hurt you once." Pain flickered in his eyes but softened. "Because I know how it feels to believe in a man who cannot believe in himself." Miles nodded. And because Isabella would want the truth seen? Hook. Sometimes the allies you need are the ghosts you thought you'd buried. Lightning fractured the sky again, but the rain had ceased. Through tall windows, the harbor sparkled beneath bruised clouds, and a shrimper's horn sounded, an ordinary life continuing while mine rewrote itself. Camille said, "Let's go." I shook my head. "One more thing." We descended the grand staircase to the foyer where the reception band packed equipment. I approached the microphone left on its stand. Feedback whined. The musicians froze. I cleared my throat and let my voice carry across the empty expanse. Friends who remain, staff who labored, strangers who witnessed, thank you for your patience. The wedding is canceled. The reasons are private for now, but I promise the truth will surface, and when it does, justice will follow. Food has been donated to the shelter on Meeting Street. Flowers are yours to keep if you wish. As for me, I will be reclaiming my name and my peace. Good afternoon applause did not erupt, but a gentle hush settled, a respect thicker than clapping. I stepped away from the mic lighter by the exact weight of Ethan Sinclair. Hold on, because even freed birds must decide where to land when the cage door swings open. Dusk spread lavender across the river as I steered my aging Mustang over the Cooper Bridge. Camille followed in her sedan. Carter's business card tucked in my glove compartment, Julian's folder on the passenger seat, Miles's quiet support vibrating in my phone with promised updates. The road hummed beneath tires, a mantra of forward motion. Yet memories flashed like signposts. Ethan's steady hand guiding me up Sullivan's lighthouse stairs, his laughter echoing in the art museum, the letterpress invitation that now served as a souvenir to folly. I parked at White Point Garden, where live oaks nodded their limbs like weary prophets. Spanish moss dripped silver in the streetlights. I needed air, and the ocean delivered it fierce and briny, scraping away floral perfume and replacing it with truth. Remember, endings are not silent funerals. Sometimes they sing sea shanties to remind you you're still afloat. Footsteps crunched gravel behind me. I turned. It was Julian. "Didn't expect company," I said. He shrugged. "Thought you'd want to know Ethan's already transferred the Belize funds into escrow. Lawyers draw up final terms tomorrow." Relief warred with sorrow. "Thank you." Julian hesitated, then held out a flash drive. "Extra backups, just in case I pocketed it. You always did like insurance." He half smiled. "I learned from the best mistakes." We walked along the seawall. Pelicans skimmed the water, silhouettes against the setting sun. Julian broke the hush. "Do you regret meeting him?" I considered. Regret is a straightforward emotion. What I feel is more intricate, a tapestry where gratitude for lessons threads through disappointment. He nodded. "Fair." We reached a bench facing Fort Sumter's dark outline. Julian's words drifted with the tide. "Ethan wasn't the only one who failed you." We all did. Each in our own selfish ways. I studied his profile, remembering the young musician who left jazz for Wall Street, trading improvisation for derivatives. "Life is generous with second chances," I said, "but it demands we arrive honest." My phone buzzed. Miles. Press found court filings. Story breaking tonight. Brace yourself. I exhaled. Tomorrow Charleston wakes to headlines. Julian shrugged. Scandal sells papers. Truth restores trust. Camille approached, coat wrapped tight, eyes shining. "Mom, come home." Julian stepped back, salute of camaraderie offered. Camille slipped her arm through mine. "I made cocoa." The simple kindness undid what remained of my composure. Tears finally came, salty as the tide. We walked to the car. Lights of cruise ships winking like distant possibilities. I glanced once more at the harbor, whispered to the wind, "Isabella, rest." Then I slid behind the wheel, turned the engine, and aimed the headlights toward tomorrow. And if you think the storm has passed, don't blink. The morning paper will carry a headline that twists the knife deeper, forcing me to face one final choice I never saw coming. Morning cracked open like a dropped porcelain teacup, sharp edges, shards everywhere, and no hope of gluing the day. back together before the world noticed the mess. I woke at 6 to the blare of a car horn and the staccato flutter of camera shutters outside my condo. Overnight, the Post and Courier had run the headline, "Juliet walks out, Romeo runs out of money," and beneath it a side-by-side of my bridal portrait and Ethan's mugshot-worthy driver's license photo. My phone blinked with 57 unread texts. Condolences, gossip, one frantic offer to sell the story for mid-5 figures. I muted them all, but silencing a ringtone never mutes reality. From the kitchen window, I counted 3 news vans, 2 bloggers with ring lights, and an enterprising teen hawking iced coffee to rubberneckers. Camille phoned from the stairwell. "Ma, don't open the door." They're camped on every floor. I peeked through the peephole anyway. A reporter from Channel 4 smoothing her hair, ready to ambush. Remember this image, because the moment a private heartbreak becomes public currency, every word you utter can appreciate or bankrupt your future. I brewed chicory coffee while local radio replayed Ethan's 15-second statement outside the courthouse. "I intend full cooperation and remain committed to restitution." His voice, so familiar now, felt like a voicemail from a stranger who had stolen my memories. The announcer segued into speculation about federal fraud charges. My stomach soured. Still, I laced my sneakers. Grief prefers motion. By 9, I was trotting down the back stairs, hoodie up, journal tucked in an inner pocket like contraband. In the alley behind the building, Carter idled in a vintage Bronco. He cracked a grin when I slid into the passenger seat. "Nice disguise. Going for incognito or witness protection chic?" "Both," I said. The engine growled as we pulled away, leaving paparazzi to debate which exit I'd used. The horizon beyond the bridge shimmered with July humidity, but relief lay somewhere past the heat mirages. Carter drove to a law office overlooking the Ashley River. Inside, Julian paced beside a conference table littered with printouts. Miles balanced styrofoam cups of coffee as if caffeine alone could prop up the day. Our attorney, Rebecca Lang, motioned us to sit. "The SEC has scheduled a preliminary injunction hearing for Friday," she announced. She adjusted tortoiseshell frames. "We'll request a global settlement, but they'll want testimony." Her gaze landed on me. "Especially yours, Magnolia. If you think walking down an aisle in satin is daunting, try walking into federal court wearing your entire future as Exhibit A." I opened Ethan's journal, sliding it across to Rebecca. "Start with Plan Magnolia," I said. She scanned, lips pressing thin, then closed the cover. "This borders on premeditated asset diversion. Helpful, painful evidence." Carter leaned forward. "What about the Belize Trust?" "Funds moved into escrow, but we need guarantees," Rebecca nodded. "Judge Helmsley is strict. He'll freeze all Sinclair assets within U.S. jurisdiction. Offshore may follow if we prove intent." Julian cleared his throat. "There's another wrinkle." He flicked on a tablet, a PDF of hotel invoices and private jet manifests. "Looks like Ethan was in Nassau 3 weeks ago meeting someone named L. Branson." Miles cursed under his breath. "Branson the venture broker? Man's reputation makes payday lenders look philanthropic." My pulse quickened. Branson specialized in distressed asset buyouts, acquiring toxic debts for pennies, then squeezing double via lawsuits. If Ethan sold our creditors' claims to Branson, restitution could twist into a profit scheme for predators. Stay with me, because even when villains fall, scavengers circle the wreckage. Rebecca exhaled. "We need to confirm that meeting's purpose before Friday." Carter's eyes found mine. "You game to join a field trip?" "To where?" "Atlanta," he said, "Branson's headquarters. We might scare up documentation, maybe lean on an insider a road trip the week my life imploded." Yet the thought stirred a spark of agency. "Pack the Bronco," I said, surprising even myself. Camille would worry. But the path to closure rarely runs through comfort. Outside, thunderheads brewed over the river, a second storm gathering. Miles handed me the backup flash drive before we parted. Redundancy, he said. Hard lessons. I pocketed it next to Ethan's journal. Truth, it turns out, loves company. Don't blink. The moment we cross state lines, loyalty will be stress-tested like steel under flame. By midday, the highway stretched behind us like a ribbon of second chances. Carter drove, windows down, Leonard Sky Nerd bleeding from old speakers. Wind tangled my hair, the journal rested on my lap, pages fluttering like jittery moths each time a semi roared by. I skimmed entries, meeting notes, cash flow tables, even a gratitude list. 1. Magnolia's laughter. 2. Her faith in me. The juxtaposition cleaved my heart. How can affection coexist with manipulation? I'd answer later. Right now I cataloged ammunition. 3 hours in, Carter pointed to a roadside diner. Grease and intel, he quipped. Inside, Formica booths gleamed under buzzing neon. Over catfish and hush puppies, Carter asked, "You okay?" I speared a hush puppy. Define okay. Not plotting to torch the Bronco and vanish, he teased. I managed a half smile. Tempting, but no. Carter's expression softened. I was a gambling addict, Maggie. I ruined us. You left. That hurt, but it saved me. Maybe exposing Ethan does the same for him. I studied his earnest face. The phrase unlikely redemption flickered behind my eyes. Our waitress, name tag Ruthie, proud grandma, nodded toward Carter's laptop open on encrypted messenger. Y'all writing a novel? I almost said yes. Instead, just closing chapters. She topped our coffee. Honey, make sure the good guys win. Carter laughed. Hook. Grandmas know the plot twist you dread might be the chapter break readers crave. Back on the road, my phone pinged. Unknown number. I hesitated, answered. Silence, then a modulated voice. Stop digging or lose everything left to love. The line clicked dead. Ice slid down my spine. Carter glanced over. I recited the threat. He accelerated. Someone's nervous. Minutes later, another ping. Text. Ethan isn't your worst enemy. No sender, no trace. I screenshot. We crossed into Georgia. Peach orchards blurred gold and green. Julian phoned from Charleston. Bad news. Branson filed liens on Sinclair assets first thing. He's positioning as principal creditor. Miles added on speaker, essentially he'll own Ethan and maybe our settlement. Carter slammed the wheel. We're not letting a vulture profit from Bella's memory. I clutched the journal. Ethan's scribble suddenly felt like a flare we could fire into Branson's darkness. Every hero needs an impossible opponent. Ours just revealed himself. Atlanta's skyline pierced to dusk, glass towers gilded. We checked into a modest hotel near Midtown. Rebecca texted, Judge advanced the hearing to Thursday. Less than 48 hours. Carter ran a hand through his hair. Tomorrow we knock on doors. I replied, Tonight we plan. We spread documents across the bedspread, flight manifests, shell company charts, phone records, Carter's contact at a telecom firm decrypted. A dot and string web emerged, Branson subsidiaries, Sinclair transfusions. At the center, one unregistered corporation, Harbor Light LLC, address listed as Ethan's old mailbox in Savannah. That's our lever, Carter said. If Harbor Light funneled investor money into Branson's empire, we could allege conspiracy, forcing both men under the same regulatory hammer, but proof required internal emails. Miles called. I can remote hack if someone plugs a jack into Branson's server. Carter looked at me. I raised a brow. I'm no spy. He grinned. You're a bride scorned, more fearless than any spy. Fearless is a word you try on like a pair of heels, wobble first, then step taller. I inhaled. I'll do it. Pause. Because agreeing to espionage 60 miles from home can either crown you heroine or land you an orange jumpsuit. We mapped a plan. Branson's HQ lobby, ask for reception records under guise of retrieving Ethan's misplaced file. While desk clerk searches, I plug Miles's stealth drive into an unsecured workstation behind the counter. 5 minutes. In and out. Carter pre-printed a letter on Sinclair letterhead authorizing me. At midnight, we rehearsed lines like actors prepping opening night, except the critics carried subpoena power. Sleep came ragged. At 4 a.m., I shot upright, heart racing. Vision of a different aisle, courtroom, not wedding, blurred my mind. Yet a quiet conviction settled like quilted weight. Isabella deserved truth. My own dignity demanded it. I lay back, waiting for sunrise and whatever mercy daylight might withhold. Wednesday dawned peach pink over Atlanta, ironic given how rotten our task felt. We dressed in muted gray, anonymous, forgettable. Carter coached, confidence sells lies. Shoulders back, I tucked Ethan's journal beneath my blazer, the drive nestled inside my pocket. When we entered Branson Capital's marble lobby, chilled air smelled of lilies, the same variety that wilted at my aborted wedding. Goose flesh rose on my arms. A receptionist in tailored navy greeted us. I introduced myself as Mrs. Sinclair, here to collect a misplaced agreement for my husband's lawsuit defense. She smiled politely. One moment, I'll check archives. She strode to a back terminal. Carter angled himself between her and passers-by while I slid behind the counter, pulse kicking like a snared rabbit. The workstation glowed. I inserted the flash drive. A progress bar crawled. 30 seconds, 20. Footsteps approached. Security guard. Carter feigned a stumble, spilling his phones. The guard bent to help. 10 seconds. The bar hit 100. Screen flashed transfer complete. I yanked the drive, slipped it in my folder, and returned to visitor side just as receptionist reemerged empty-handed. Apologies, ma'am. Nothing under that name. I sighed theatrically. Worth a try. My lawyer will request duplicates. Thank you for your kindness. We departed, hearts drumming timpani. And here's the cliff edge. We don't yet know whether the data we stole is dynamite or just smoke. In the Bronco, Carter plugged the drive into his laptop, Miles connected via secure tunnel, code scrolled, file trees, email archives. Miles whistled. Jackpot. Harbor Light Ledger plus correspondence titled Operation Wedding Gift. My blood chilled. We opened one thread. Ethan wrote Branson a week ago attaching guest list, promising public optics to shield transfer if marital union proceeds. Branson replied, understood. Post-nuptial donation funnel vis-a-vis Harbor Light at 70% split. Carter slapped the dashboard. They plan to launder investor cash through your joint accounts. My knees buckled. Had the wedding continued, I'd have become accomplice by marriage. Sometimes salvation looks like humiliation walking in on cue. Miles found more. A draft press release positioning Branson Capital as rescue partner for Sinclair strategic investors. The spin was breathtaking. Transform fraud into benevolence by buying debts at discount, then suing Ethan for repayment insured. By, ironically, my dowry. Julian texted a court doc. Judge approved asset freeze pending Thursday hearing. Perfect. Attach these emails and Harbor Light books, and Branson would be dragged under the freeze too. We raced toward Rebecca's Atlanta satellite office. En route, my phone rang. Ethan. Against Carter's protest, I answered. His voice shook. Maggie, whatever you've heard, it's Branson. He threatened to ruin us both. Us? I snapped. You sold me as collateral. He inhaled raggedly. Meet me. I can explain to the SEC, I said and hung up. Seconds later, a text pinged. He won't let me testify. Help me, and I'll sign everything. Location. A parking garage 4 blocks away. Carter insisted it was a trap. Yet, instinct whispered this meeting might expose final leverage. We parked on the 5th level of the concrete labyrinth. Fluorescence flickered. Exhaust fogged the air. Ethan emerged from shadows, raincoat flapping though sky was clear. His face, once composed, now etched with panic. Branson knows you took the files, he hissed. He has people. Dangerous. I pressed record on my phone. Admit your role. He looked around then. Yes. I diverted funds to Harbor Light, planned to cycle them through your assets. Branson financed it, but he'll silence anyone who jeopardizes payout. Tires squealed below. Black SUV climbing. Ethan's eyes widened. That's them. Carter stepped from behind a pillar, brandishing his phone set to live stream. Smile, Ethan. Confessions in the cloud. The SUV doors cracked open. 2 men strode out. One flashed a pistol butt. My heart hammered, but Carter stood firm. Security's on the way, he bluffed. Sirens wailed. Distant but approaching. The men cursed, retreated. The SUV screeched downward. Ethan sagged. I looked at him. No veil of love, no haze of hope, just a man cornered by the consequences he'd sown like landmines. Come to court, I said. Tell everything. He nodded, tears cutting through grime. Carter whispered, Time to go. That evening, safe in Rebecca's office, we added the recorded confession to our arsenal. She smiled for the first time. Branson's empire just gained a new address, Exhibit Hall. Yet victory felt tempered. Isabella was still gone, investors still scarred. Still, light cracked the clouds. At midnight, as I finally drifted towards sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown sender, a single image, my condo bathed in police lights, yellow tape across the entrance. Caption, Collateral can still bleed. I bolted upright, dread flooding every vein. Tell me, reader, would you rush home or race to court? Because in Chapter 4, the line between justice and vengeance will blur in blue and red flashes. Blue strobes bounced riotously across the brick facade of my condo, as if someone had decided to paint my life with lightning. The text message's taunt, collateral can still bleed, clung to my thoughts like wet fabric. By the time Carter's Bronco fishtailed onto King Street, squad cars already choked the curb, and a knot of neighbors huddled in pajamas behind yellow tape, whispering my name with the incredulous thrill small scandals bring to quiet nights. I ducked beneath the tape, detectives' glare be damned. Inside, shattered glass glittered on hardwood, shards catching police light prisms in a macabre confetti. My living room bookshelf, a shrine to cookbooks and Camille's childhood art, lay gutted, volumes strewn like wounded soldiers. Near the balcony door, a message was gouged into drywall with something sharp. Pay or they pay, my pulse hiccuped. The threat had breached more than plaster. It had punctured the fragile sense of safety left after yesterday's collapse. An officer approached. Ma'am, we need you outside. I need to know if anyone's hurt, I said. My voice must have carried the force of a hurricane warning because he stepped aside. The master bedroom door had been forced. My jewelry box lay on its side, pearls beading the carpet like pale teardrops. But the real violation waited on the vanity mirror, scrawled in red lipstick, Thursday, 9 a.m., drop the case. My court hearing was set for 9 sharp. Whoever choreographed this break-in wanted fear to ride shotgun to justice. Hook, ever wonder what happens when justice and terror share the same appointment time? You're about to see which one shows up first. Detective Harrell took my statement. Miss, Price, any idea who'd do this? Someone who misjudged how stubborn I can be. My hands trembled. Rage and adrenaline formed a bitter alloy in my veins. Carter snapped photos for evidence, jaw clenched tight enough to snap. The police dusted for prints, unlikely to find any helpful given gloves and competence implied by that neat 9 a.m. signature. Camille arrived, face chalk white, clutching a garment bag, the wedding dress I'd never wear. Mom, come stay with me. Please, I touched the satin, suddenly more burial shroud than bridal gown. No, I said, surprising both of us. We finished this. Camille's eyes flashed fear and admiration. Then I'm not leaving your side. At 3 a.m., forensics packed up. The condo fell silent but for the sticky whisper of crime scene tape on the broken doorframe. Carter brewed coffee, international incident strength. We gathered at my kitchen island, blueprints of dread spread across butcher block, Branson emails, Ethan's confession, the lipstick ultimatum, Julian joined via video call. Miles triangulated burner phone pings near my building. One number matched a prepaid traced to Branson's assistant, Lowell Drake. Evidence stacked, but sunrise loomed, dragging the hearing with it. I sipped scalding coffee. They want fear. Let's give them spectacle. Carter frowned. Meaning? We still testify, I said, only louder. Another hook. Courage is just fear that's been given marching orders. Ours deploys at dawn. We drafted amended affidavits, including the break-in threats, emailed Rebecca. She replied in minutes. Judge Helmsley will rubber stamp emergency protection detail. Comforting, but no order of protection can silence a hired gun before he pulls the trigger. I stared at the lipstick on mirror fragments bagged as evidence, crimson echoing Isabella's last hospital roses. My heart hammered a promise. The little sister Miles lost would not be revenged with whispers. Truth would stand in floodlights. At 5:30, the horizon bruised mauve. I changed into a charcoal suit, pinned my late grandmother's dove brooch at the lapel, a small reminder that peace sometimes perches hardest on storm-bent branches. Detective Harrell assigned 2 cruisers and an unmarked sedan to shadow us. Carter tucked my flash drive into a hollowed legal pad, physical redundancy for digital bombs. As we stepped into dawn's pale breath, thunder grown distant. Georgia storm migrating up the coast. The air smelled like copper wire about to spark. And for the first time since the Isle turned into a battlefield, I felt steady, not calm, but forged. Stay close, because the courthouse doors are about to swing open, and what waits inside will demand a toll no coward can pay. Charleston Federal Courthouse rises like stubborn marble against centuries of hurricanes, yet its security checkpoint felt flimsier than the resolve in my gut. Agents ushered us through metal detectors, side-eyeing the police escort. In the atrium, TV crews jockeyed for angles. Microphones bloomed like invasive weeds. Rebecca met us with a nod and an embossed folder. Judge granted a protective order and sealed the break-in report. We'll reveal threat evidence if Branson's counsel challenges credibility. She ushered us into conference room C. Ethan waited inside, gaunt, handcuffed, flanked by marshals. His gaze snagged on the dove brooch. You look strong, he whispered, voice frayed. Strength is cheaper than regret, I replied. A marshal guided him out for transport to holding. The door thudded shut on whatever sympathy remained between us. Rebecca briefed us 3 motions: asset freeze extension, injunction against Branson Capital, and conditional immunity for Ethan contingent on full cooperation. Carter raised a brow. Immunity? Limited, Rebecca said. If we want his testimony, we can't hang him first. She met my eyes. Justice is often ugly triage. I nodded, though the idea of Ethan escaping prison felt like swallowing glass. Hook, can justice survive compromise, or does it rot from the inside out? Keep watching. Court convened at 9 a.m. sharp. Oak benches creaked beneath journalist weight. Judge Helmsley, thin, silver-haired, rumored to despise theatrics, took the bench. Branson occupied defense table, sharkskin suit gleaming, his smile a paper cut. His attorney, Sybil Keene, opened with venom. Your Honor, my client is a reputable financier, unfairly entangled in Mr. Sinclair's failings. We moved to dismiss the injunction. Rebecca rose, calm as tidewater. We have evidence of co-conspiracy, Your Honor, including threatened intimidation of witnesses. She submitted the flash drive. Sybil objected. Judge Helmsley waved it forward, uninterested in showmanship. Miles's quick hack now glowed on courtroom monitors, email chains labeled Operation Wedding Gift, bank ledgers, an image of my lipstick-defaced mirror. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Branson's jaw tightened, his gaze speared me, and then, unmistakably, he winked. A chill spider crawled up my spine. Another hook. The wink of a cornered predator is not flirtation, it's aperture, revealing how wide he may bite to escape. Rebecca called her first witness, me. I took the oath, palms dry. Fear apparently remembered to sweat later. She guided me through the timeline. Engagement, wedding interruption, Ethan's confession, break-in. Did you feel safe returning home that night? No, I said, because the perpetrators made it clear safety required silence. She nodded. Yet you're testifying. Silence, I told the court, would finish the crime Isabella's death began. Sybil cross-examined, tone dripping condescension. Miss Price, after 5 marriages, would you say drama follows you? Objection. Sustained. She pivoted. Isn't it true you stood to gain financially from marrying Mr. Sinclair? I met her gaze. I stood to gain partnership. Money I already had. Murmurs. Helmsley rapped gavel. Sybil smirked but moved on. Rebecca called Carter, Julian, and Miles. Each recounted betrayal under oath, weaving a tapestry of trust stretched to snapping. Finally, marshals escorted Ethan in. Shackles clinked, echoing like dirty wind chimes. He sat, eyes fixed on the seal behind Helmsley's chair, justice blindfolded, sword aloft. Under direct exam, he admitted forging documents, channeling funds to Harbor Light, colluding with Branson. Sybil objected repeatedly. Helmsley overruled. Then Ethan added, voice cracking, Branson threatened Magnolia's life if I testified. Gasps again. Branson's attorney leapt up. Hearsay. Helmsley allowed it for context. Rebecca produced phone logs linking Branson's assistant to burner numbers pinging near my condo. The judge's eyes narrowed. Yet Sybil had one card. She produced a settlement offer signed that morning, Branson willing to repay investors in exchange for lifted injunctions. Acts of generosity, not guilt, she proclaimed. Helmsley studied the document. Miss. Lang, any response? Rebecca leaned in. Your Honor, generosity drafted at gunpoint is extortion wearing perfume. The judge recessed for 20 minutes. In the corridor, reporters swarmed. My escort formed a phalanx. Suddenly, a courthouse deputy jogged up. Ma'am, urgent, garage level. Your daughter panic slammed my chest so hard the hallway spun. Carter grabbed my arm. Camille's with 2 officers upstairs. Then who? The deputy's face flickered. Too late. He shoved me toward a stairwell. I stumbled down concrete steps, heels scraping. Door slammed above. I registered no uniform badge, no nameplate, only danger. At the landing stood Lowell Drake, Branson's assistant, suit traded for mechanic's overalls, gun gleaming. Mr. Branson says time's up. Drop the case, my pulse roared. Drake stepped closer, barrel rising. And then boom! The stairwell door above burst open. Carter hurtled down, tackle slamming Drake. Guns skittered. I kicked it away. Sirens howled. Real deputies flooded in. Drake cuffed within seconds. I sagged against wall. Knees rubber, spirit iron. Hook. Sometimes salvation arrives wearing yesterday's guilt and today's bravery. Decide quickly which to embrace. Back in court, Rebecca revealed the kidnapping attempt. Helmsley returned, face storm cloud dark. He extended the asset freeze, ordered Branson remanded without bail on witness tampering pending federal charges, and granted Ethan conditional immunity only to secure conviction of the greater architect. Gavels slammed, justice echoed like thunder, finally spending itself. Outside, sunlight sliced through clouds, scattering paparazzi like startled pigeons. Yet the storm hadn't finished with me. One final lightning bolt crackled in Ethan's departing whisper. Branson kept copies. Someone else will come. I stared at the marble steps, realizing victory boasts echoes I'd battled for years. But echoes fade when truth keeps ringing louder. By late afternoon, the courthouse lobby had emptied of reporters, but the residual hum of scandal lingered in corners like stubborn perfume. Marshals whisked Branson to detention. Drake occupied a separate cell. Ethan awaited transfer to a safe facility where cooperation would either redeem or doom him. Rebecca handled post-hearing paperwork while Carter fetched coffee, our shared sacrament after war. Julian and Miles updated investor groups, relief rippling like sunrise across a siege-dark harbor. Camille hugged me so fiercely I felt the day's toxins bleed out between her trembling arms. Let's go home, she whispered. I hesitated. glancing toward Ethan's guarded corridor. Part of me longed to bury the hatchet. Part of me wanted never to revisit the battlefield. In the end, compassion spoke louder than exhaustion. "Wait downstairs," I told Camille. "I'll be 5 minutes." A marshal escorted me to a holding interview room. Ethan sat alone, wrists free now, cooperation buying small comforts. He looked years older than the man who once planned beach picnics and whispered stock tips over pillow talk. I closed the door. Silence thickened like congealed blood. Finally, he spoke. "You saved lives today." I shook my head. I just refused to trade them for silence. Ethan exhaled, a sound between sigh and surrender. I wanted a fresh start. "With you, it felt possible. Fresh starts aren't built on rotting foundations," I said. His eyes shimmered. "Tell me how to make amends." I thought of Isabella, of investors' emptied pensions, of lipstick threats. Amends begin with truth, and truth never ends, so neither will your work. I slid a folded sheet across the table, names of investors still unpaid, charities in Isabella's memory. "Begin there." He traced the list like Braille, nodding. "Magnolia, I raised a hand. "We walk different roads now." I stood. "May yours finally lead somewhere honest." I left without looking back. Hook. Closure isn't the slamming door, it's the quiet hallway beyond, where you choose which light switch to flick next. Downstairs, evening spread gold across stained glass windows. Carter pressed a coffee into my hand. "Judge approved restitution plan. Investors will recoup 80 cents on the dollar miles added via speakerphone, media rebranding Branson Capital as Branson Collapse." Julian laughed, first true laugh since my non-wedding day. Camille twined her arm in mine. "Home?" "Yes," I said, though home would require redefinition. We reached my condo at sunset. The forensic crew had finished. Drywall patch-covered menace, but scent of plaster mingled with jasmine from street planters, a fragrance that whispered life's insistence on bloom after vandalism. I stepped over tape, surveyed the room. In a corner lay the garment bag. I unzipped it. The gown, ivory, intricate lace, gleamed, but I saw it now as artifact, not aspiration. I folded it carefully, placed it in a donation box destined for a thrift shop where perhaps another bride, braver or luckier, would rewrite its story. Carter found me on the balcony watching cargo ships slide along the Cooper, hulls etched against bruised sky. "You did it," he said. I sipped coffee gone cold. "We barely began." He lifted one shoulder. "Beginnings are underrated. They hold infinite endings." I studied his face, creased with old regret, alight with present courage. "And what ending would you write for yourself now?" He smiled. Small. Real. One word at a time. Inside, Camille organized volunteers to redistribute wedding flowers to nursing homes. Joy repurposed, sorrow composted into something fragrant. My phone pinged. "Miles. Isabella's parents send gratitude, invite you to memorial." Tears welled, cleansing not corroding. I typed back, "Honored to attend." Later, as dusk deepened, Rebecca emailed final court order PDFs. Asset freeze permanent. Branson indicted. Ethan's conditional immunity locked. Breach, and he'd face full charges. I forwarded copies to investor group threads. Responses flooded. Relief, forgiveness, resolve. In each message, I glimpsed a mosaic of healing. At midnight, wind carried distant thunder, storm remnants limping out to sea. I opened windows. Salt kissed the bruised air inside. Camille slept in the guest room, safe. Carter stretched on couch, a sentinel against nightmares. I perched at my desk, retrieved the last page of Ethan's journal, blank save for a single clipped lavender petal. Perhaps he'd pressed it hoping love might hold scent longer than guilt. I tucked the petal into a new notebook, one I'd film myself. I wrote, "Trust is not a fragile thing. It is tempered glass, clear yet strong when forged in honest fire. Mine shattered, but shards reflect light I never noticed while intact. FOMO hook. Think the story ends here? Wait until the morning's headlines spin redemption into rumor and see how a woman once labeled runaway bride learns to run toward herself instead. But those headlines belong to another day, one in which I will wake, brew chicory coffee, and turn the first page of my own unghost-written future. And when fear knocks again, as it surely will, I'll answer not with silence, but with the echo of every vow I now make to myself. I choose truth. I choose courage. I choose beginnings that do not depend on someone else's ending. The harbor lights blinked in code only hearts can read. Carry on, carry on, carry on. So I did. Sunrise brushed Charleston in honey-colored calm, but the headlines that followed tasted of cayenne and smoke. Branson behind bars, Sinclair sings, runaway. No more blared above a photo of me stepping out of court. Dove brooch gleaming like a shard of sky at 6 a.m. I brewed chicory coffee, opened the window, and let the harbor wind flip the newspaper's pages the way it once flipped my veil. Keep reading, because serenity rarely lasts longer than a sip. By the time this cup cools, a new aftershock will rattle everything we just rebuilt. My living room still wore crime scene bruises, drywall patches, faint dust of plaster, but Camille bustled through with a toolbox, determined to erase every scar. Carter measured trim for a replacement bookshelf, the police escort parked below like silent punctuation. I wanted normalcy, but normal is a language you relearn syllable by syllable after trauma. A push alert chimed on my phone. Branson requests emergency bail hearing citing medical crisis. Rebecca called 2 minutes later. His lawyers claim arrhythmia. I snorted. Convenient timing. Judge will convene at noon. We'll fight it, she paused. Are you strong enough to appear? Hook. One more courtroom showdown could either hammer the final nail or pry the coffin open. Which would you risk? I answered. Tell Helmsley I'm on my way. At 10 a.m., investors gathered in a rented hall on Meeting Street to sign restitution documents. Miles coordinated tables like an air traffic controller, Julian notarized. Some hugged me, some avoided my gaze. Pain makes for peculiar gratitude. An elderly widow pressed my hands. You salvaged my pension, baby. God carried you through tears, blurred the ink on her paperwork. I blinked mine away. In the corner, a local news crew hovered, hungry for sound bites. I declined interviews. Truth belongs in affidavits first, microphones second. Mid-morning, Carter passed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a cashier's check, $25,000, Magnolia Price. Proceeds from the wedding venue refund, he said. Thought you might give it purpose. Ideas flared, scholarships, shelters, but I tucked the check into my journal, letting possibility marinate. Stay tuned. That single piece of paper will seed something larger than any bouquet that ever wilted in my hands. As noon neared, Camille protested my return to court. Let the lawyers handle arrhythmia theatrics, I cupped her cheek. A bully counting on silence doesn't deserve the courtesy. She sighed, fetched my blazer, and drove. On the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Police escorted me inside. Branson sat in a wheelchair, oxygen tube taped beneath his nose, performance art in polyester. Judge Helmsley's stare sliced through pretense. Sybil pleaded for bail. Rebecca countered with stairwell gun footage and the lipstick threat. I took the stand again. Your Honor, arrhythmia can be monitored in federal custody. Freedom, however, would grant Mr. Branson arrhythmia-inducing power over every witness. Helmsley ruled. Bail denied. The gavel's crack sounded like granite sealing a crypt. But walking out, we passed Branson's lawyer whispering into a phone, and I caught 2 chilling words. Second contractor. Remember that whisper. The shadow it casts will stretch farther than any courtroom corridor. 3 months later, autumn edged the palmettos with copper, and the criminal trial loomed like a harvest moon, bright, inescapable. In the meantime, life sprouted tentative green. I leased a sunlit storefront on East Bay, hung a hand-painted sign, Harbor Light Haven, the irony intentional. Inside, volunteers repurposed my canceled wedding decor into a community legal aid hub funded by the cashier's check and returning investor donations. We offered coffee, Wi-Fi, and pro bono clinics for anyone steamrolled by corporate schemes. The first day we opened, a line curled down the block. Here's the hook. Philanthropy might smell of roses, but watch how fast vultures catch the scent. Carter taught budgeting workshops, Miles set up cybersecurity sessions, Julian handled small claims guidance. Isabella's parents mailed framed photos of her, smiling in a sunflower field to grace the waiting room. I spoke at her memorial in Savannah beneath live oak shadows, reading a poem about hope persisting like marsh grass after storms. When I stepped away from the podium, Miles hugged me so fiercely we both felt her presence between us. Yet peace grew brittle. Strange cars idled outside my condo at night, phone calls crackled with silence and then dead air. Detective Harold traced them to burner numbers, hopping cell towers along I-95. Branson's second contractor? Federal marshals tightened my protective detail, but tension strummed nerves. Taut. I kept a go-bag by the door, passport, cash, flash drive of evidence copies. Fear teaches pragmatism. 2 weeks before trial, Ethan requested a meeting. He arrived escorted, thinner, but eyes clearer, as though shedding secrets trimmed excess weight. In Harbor Light Haven's quiet office, he laid signed forms on my desk, transfer of remaining personal assets into Isabella's foundation, plus a letter to investors confessing full wrongdoing. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but contrition must be concrete. I nodded, heart a complicated mosaic, shards of betrayal reframing shards of sincerity. He lingered. Branson still has reach. You're not safe. Neither are you, I replied. He managed a rueful smile. Difference is, I deserve what's coming. I almost argued, then realized absolution wasn't my gift to give. Hook. When the guilty try to build ladders out of apologies, should we hold the base or step aside? Trial week arrived with crisp air and magnolia leaves swirling like parchment confetti. Jury selection drew national coverage. Morning talk shows debated corporate greed, romance gone wrong narratives, even the ethics of my 5 marriages, as if nuptial frequency equated to complicity. I let the noise wash over me like seawater over shells. Abrasive, reshaping, but ultimately incapable of erasing core strength. On day 2, prosecution unveiled the stairwell gun attempt. Lowell Drake took the stand, plea deal inked under trembling hands. He recounted instructions from an encrypted messaging app, his handler's alias Crimson Gull. Subpoenaed data linked the alias to a Croatian shell company funded by Branson's emergency accounts. Sybil objected, overruled. But the bigger shock landed in cross-examination. Drake admitted he'd been hired before Branson's bail denial. Contingency violence. A gasp rippled. That night, Harold delivered new intel. Crimson Gull had wired $10,000 to an address in Beaufort, 2 hours south. Marshals raided. House empty but for burner phones, blueprints of my condo, and a single Polaroid of Harbor Light Haven circled in red. Fear punched me raw. Camille begged me to relocate. I looked at Harbor Light's sign glowing in dusk and refused. We won't let terror silence testimony again, I said. Yet I packed the go-bag heavier. Courage doesn't exile caution, it co-opts it. Court recessed for the weekend, and I sought respite on Sullivan's Island beach. Wind-combed tide lines clean. Carter joined carrying 2 folding chairs and iced tea. We sat at water's edge, gulls strafing sunlit waves. You ever tire of battles? He asked. Only when they outlive their purpose. And this one? I watched sun sink, painting water molten bronze. Purpose remains. He hesitated. When it's done, when Branson's convicted, what then? I kicked sand. Harbor Light Haven grows statewide. Maybe we fund microloans for women escaping coercive marriages. Carter smiled. A lighthouse visible from miles. That's you. His words warmed like dusk sun on skin. Hook, when two ex-spouses find themselves shoulder to shoulder against darkness, can friendship step back from the ledge and blossom? Or does history keep it tethered? Wait and see. Verdict day. Courtroom packed. Tension palpitating the air itself. 12 jurors filed in, eyes unreadable. Forewoman stood. On the count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, guilty. On the count of intimidation of witnesses, guilty. On the count of attempted kidnapping, guilty. Each word struck like a bell toll, but instead of mourning, the gallery exhaled jubilation. Branson's shoulders sagged. Sybil closed her briefcase with surgical finality. Ethan, seated at prosecution's table, stared at the floor. Liberated from Branson's shadow, yet caged by memory. Sentencing scheduled for spring, but Helmsley denied all appeals for release. Outside, cameras flashed, investors cheered, Isabella's parents wept relief. I stepped to microphones, not as victim, but as lighthouse keeper. Justice won today, I said, voice steady. Yet justice isn't a destination, it's daily maintenance. Harbor Light Haven will remain open for anyone navigating storms. Reporters pressed for personal updates. I smiled. My personal life is finally mine to write, one honest page at a time. Over winter, Charleston cooled, tourist chatter giving way to rustling palmetto fronds. Harbor Light Haven's holiday food drive overflowed. Camille organized mentorship programs, Miles installed encrypted Wi-Fi. Julian launched a podcast, Scam No More. Carter rebuilt my bookshelf, then surprised me with another, a tiny free library box outside Haven stocked with legal aid pamphlets and poetry. He painted it sea blue. I lettered a quote on the side. Truth is a tide, persistent, patient, unstoppable. One January evening, we closed up late. Rain painted cobblestones silver. Carter locked the door, turned to me. Dinner? I hesitated. History heavy. Future fragile. Friends? He lifted a brow. Friends who survived a plot twist or two. I laughed, felt something ease. We walked beneath cafe lights, steam rising from street drains like sighs of the city letting go. As we passed a florist, he tucked a single magnolia bloom behind my ear. For strength, he said. FOMO whisper, call it foreshadowing or foolish hope, but petals sometimes outlast hurricanes. Sentencing day arrived cold but bright. The courtroom's energy felt calmer, resolution settling like snow. Branson received 23 years, Lowell Drake 7. Ethan, 4 years in community confinement with mandatory restitution oversight, plus 5,000 hours of nonprofit work. Helmsley's nod to redemption through service. Ethan met my gaze, mouthed, thank you. I nodded, accepting the complicated grace of unfinished atonement. Spring unfurled wisteria along iron gates. Harbor Light Haven expanded to a second location in Beaufort, funded by investor donations and a grant named for Isabella. On launch day, I addressed the crowd. Dove brooch now soldered to my blazer, symbol of surviving flight. This center, I said, stands because truth is contagious, courage more viral than fear. Applause blended with birdsong. Back in Charleston that evening, I parked by the seawall where this saga's debris once weighed me down. I opened my journal, now full, and began a new volume, its first page blank, horizon wide. I wrote, beginnings require courage, continuations require faith. I closed the cover, breathed salt air, and smiled as the lighthouse at Morris Island blinked to life, beam sweeping the dark. Last hook. Think the story ends here? Stories never end. They ripple. Every life. Harbor Light Haven touches becomes a chapter I may never read but helped write. As for me, I keep the porch light on, coffee brewed, and a spare chair ready, because when the next storm walks in wearing 3 dark suits or just one weary face, I'll be here, steady as tide, refusing to let trust drown again. And that, dear listener, is how my 5th almost wedding became not a finish line, but the buoy from which I learned to swim farther than fear ever dreamed.